Here to take notes for the mayor and his master copy.
Okay, y'all, we're going on our work session now. We're doing page 60 through 71, I believe it was. Okay, which is section 4.9 through 4.15. Does anyone have any comment or concern on the page 60? I have a question for staff, though. Didn't you say at the last work session that we were going to try to get away from required street trees? Or was that just in neighborhoods?
No, we want to get away from street trees altogether.
Okay.
Because we just feel like it'd be a nightmare to manage.
Yeah. So on that bottom part where it says landscaping and screening, can we have it be a greenery installation every 30 feet to include a combo of bushes and plants instead of trees? That way it'll keep the greenery aspect but not be something that requires maintenance.
Who's going to be responsible for doing the maintenance? Because if it's a city, boy, we're starting to overload them pretty bad.
That's true, but just remember this neighborhood commercial area is just this one section down the main road that we've approved. But it's still going to add to the streets department or whoever. So that's why I'm asking staff, what do y'all want to do?
Well, personally, I'd like to avoid it altogether.
Okay.
I mean, it's something that can be done. It would just require personnel to maintain it, so.
Could we put something in there like approval by us, so?
I mean, we can, or we can make an amendment later once the city grows and it happens and staff has to increase, and then we have the ability to be able to maintain it. But I don't know if we should do any kind of requirement for the people that are building it while we don't have the option to be able to maintain it.
Yeah, I think it's best if we
Modify
just.
at a later date.
Yeah.
I have a question concerning that. There are some programs that the state sponsors on Tree City, and they have conditions you have to meet in order to qualify for that. It has to be certain types of trees and the location of them. But the city also in their annual budget has to budget so much money to maintain those trees. And I don't know if that's still a viable program for the city or not. And I don't know if Bruce knows or not.
From what I've heard about Tree City, you have to have a tree board to be able to be a part of Tree City. Does board have a tree board?
They did, but
Okay.
all those people have since passed.
Okay. Yeah, so we can't do the Tree City thing anymore because we don't have a tree
You
board?
can do it, but you have to reapply.
Okay.
So
That's an option, yeah, okay. So Bruce, we should just remove the landscaping requirements out of all of these tables?
Yes, I think so. We'd actually made that request for them to do that. I feel like they just missed those areas.
Okay, so I'm just going to mark it out on landscaping on this one, and as we go forward, I'll mark it out on the next ones.
So is there like areas or is there like, I'm sorry, I missed the last meeting, so I am catching up, like for growth, like later on, like if we don't have that in there, whenever this is built, that it can be put in at a later date or whatever, is that?
That's what I'm thinking, that we can make an amendment in the future. Once the neighborhood commercial gets built and board has more of a budget in the city and has more staff to be able to take care of that. But a lot of things that are in here, I think, don't apply to us because we're so small. So I think this might be something that we should just mark off for now. Are y'all good with that? Okay. On page 61, anyone have any questions? Okay, I'm going to go to page 62 then. I have a question about commercial corridor. it says stories heights under K, and I'm just wondering, is 5 normal, or can we do that as 3 as well, since it's a small town? I don't know how commercial would work here. Would we ever have a commercial corridor that would have a building that had 5 stories? Or should we keep it in there just in case? It's really a
I don't know,
question for
that's,
Gary.
I wouldn't say we never would, but
well, think about it in the fire department
fire
standpoint.
code changes at 5 stories, why most cities blanket that at 5 stories, but I think 3 stories would probably be more realistic, and then if somebody come in and wanted to build a 5-story building, we could evaluate that to see if that could be met at our city level.
What would be the advantage of dropping it from 5 to 3?
Just visual appeal, rather than having a big 5-foot story building in the middle of the commercial corridor that may have neighborhood right next to it.
Right.
It's-
Okay.
That's just my thought about it, but that's why I was asking staff, should we just keep that?
Honestly, I'll just tell you, I'm afraid that a 5-story building would jeopardize our fire department ISO rating. And I just think that we could evaluate this better on a per case basis.
Okay.
And have it blanketed at 35 feet, and if somebody wanted to apply for a variance of that, and there was enough land and water available for suppression, and then we could address it individually, I think, a lot better.
If we established it at 3 stories and then they wanted to come in, like you said, on a case-by-case basis, would that be a variance? Just to go ahead and allow that?
It would be a variance, and it would require staff to approve it first
Yeah,
before it comes.
I think that'd be fine.
Okay.
And I would even caution you, I know it says 5 stories here, I would do that in a number of feet, say 30, 35 feet, because typically a story is 10 feet tall, and when you're sizing up a building for suppression, that's what you kind of use as a guide. But you see a lot of houses that have mezzanine ceilings, and they could be 25 feet on their first story. So if you're going to go by number of stories, you could well exceed 35 feet. So rather than 3 stories, I would say 30 to 35 feet. I'd use
That works for
35
me.
feet. The tallest ground ladder the fire department has is 35 feet.
Okay.
Our fire department does have an aerial apparatus. They could exceed 35 feet. But I'm afraid that we would be getting into a jeopardizing our ISO rating
Yeah.
if we made that a blanket.
Okay, so I'm just gonna mark that we're gonna change the 5 stories to 35 feet. And then also remove the landscaping at the bottom. I do have a question for staff on page 63. Does anyone else have any questions about 62? I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. Okay. On page 63, under parking 4.10.32B, it says liner buildings may front and be aligned with the primary street. I'm just wondering, what is a liner building? That term kind of confused me reading through this page.
What was that section again?
4.10.32B. In the middle, number 2.
Next to the two diagrams.
I'm looking at
B.
definitions, that's a good sign.
I haven't heard that term used, so. Okay.
Maybe it's referring to the ones that are perpendicular with the front of the building is perpendicular with the street versus parallel. Or maybe it's referring to the ones that the front of the building's parallel with the street.
If you look on page 64, center, you'll see, there's the top left one has a liner of the buildings right here to the street. And then there's another building with the parking in the center. Is that what they're talking about?
Did you look in the definitions, Gary, and find it?
Can't find this definition, but I'm thinking we at least at a minimum email Bernadette and ask her to combine that.
Oh, here it is. Found it on page 166. A building that is placed between a public right-of-way and off-street parking to frame the street, maintain an active street frontage, and screen the parking lot from view.
That's it, top left-hand,
Yeah.
4.2.3.c.
yeah. In the center, there's the top left-hand one has,
4.10.3.c.
yeah. Okay.
Are those occupied buildings, or are they just for decoration?
Occupied,
Okay.
and the parking lot is occupied.
Great, this was. Let me read this again now that I know what it is. Give me a second. Okay, so like, say we have, like Walmart in Cabot, how they have Slim Chickens and Starbucks in the driveway in front of them, those would be would be liner buildings if there was no parking in front of them and all the parking was between Walmart and Slim Chickens. So, I think that's what they're saying, because it fronts the street.
I like that explanation better than that definition.
Okay.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, I understand that.
I can understand that too. I have to visualize it. Any other questions on page 63 or about that subject? Okay, let's move to 64. Anything on 64? Okay, moving on to industrial, section 4.11 on page 65. Questions I had, let's see. On J in the table, it says property line coverage not regulated, and I'm just wondering why it wouldn't be. Like, could they go all the way to the property line? Is that what that's saying, or does that mean no setbacks? Well, no, it says side street 25. Section 4.15.
Oh, there's setbacks.
Right. I'm just, that confused me a little.
Section 4.
If y'all flip to section, page 72, it does have front property line coverage percentage and stuff like that, so I guess that's what that means. I should have read the small print. I'm sorry, what'd you say?
All this reminds me of Hilton Dick.
It reminds you of Hilton Head? Well, Hilton Head's not a bad place to visit. Okay. And just a note for future, when we go over design standards, I'd like to really focus on building facades, because I think that that's something that could really make or break a downtown area. If we create, neighborhood commercial, we want it to look nice. So I think the facades are going to be important to look at. But that's all I had for that page. Does anybody else have something for 65 or?
I do,
Okay.
since we're looking at buildings and this says a 5 stories max too. Can we make that one 35 foot too, depending, but it also depends on what the industry is
Right, that's what
too.
I'm worried about, industrial.
Or taller than that. Got it.
Gary, you have any thoughts on that? Michael?
We need to do a foot.
I mean, for industrial, 5 stories, I really would leave it there just for the simple fact, just for some equipment and the type of, I mean, you're talking about boilers and that kind of equipment that you're gonna be putting in there. I mean, that height difference would.
And won't they be
definitely-
required to have sprinklers?
Yes, most
Okay,
would.
okay.
Again, we could do it here, we could do it on a case-by-case basis, but we would yield that to Bruce at the time, because if we didn't have the water, we wouldn't have the water regardless,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
They'd either have to supply pumps or storage, or their own storage or whatever, so.
Yeah, and we'd go over that at the staff level to make sure there's adequate water supply and fire protection.
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
Thank you.
All right, we'll keep it as it is. Thank you, Helen, for mentioning that. Any other questions on 65?
Yes, on the landscaping and screening, it's a little bit different. We eliminated the street trees or canopy trees, but this talks about residential zones requiring extra screening. I think that might be something that we would want to consider in an industrial zone if it butts up to a residential.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's saying, is that properties abutting residential zones will require extra screening.
Yeah,
So-
but we have been eliminating the landscaping from all of the charts, and I encourage us to keep that section of this.
Oh, like in commercial as well? Okay.
Yes.
Which I'll be, is that part of the site plan requirements anyway with commercial?
Not the street trees, but
Just the,
the
yeah.
extra screening when it abuts a residential zone.
For commercial and industrial?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
My short-term memory sucks. What did we do about the buildings? I didn't write it down quick enough.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was on, it was explained well on page 72 and 73 about how the front property line coverage, the property line coverage factors.
Okay, all right. All right, thank you. All right, gotcha.
So we're going to add the properties abutting residential zones require extra screening for commercial.
Yes.
Staff okay with that?
Yeah, yes.
I'm sorry. The story height on the industrial, what did we decide on?
We're going to leave it as is
Okay, all right.
because it'll have to be approved by Bruce to make sure that they have enough water for.
Yeah, well, 5 stories. Would you want to do it 55 feet? Because on 3 stories it's 35.
A lot of warehouses, they may have 30-foot tall ceilings in their warehouse area. That's
Or 40.
or even
40.
So I still think we ought to do a number of feet, whatever that number is, I'll be fine. But the number of stories, that's just kind of specifically vague. Kind of ambiguous a little bit.
We said the fire code or whatever, it changes it after 5 stories. Do they define a height?
There is an area and height section of the code, but it's pretty much,
They use a pumping system then,
yeah.
when you get up so high.
We could, I'll take it,
35 feet.
we can leave that as is right now.
Can we revisit that?
Let me look
Can
at
we
that.
revisit that?
I've written it down. I'll talk to the chief tomorrow about it as well, but, put a question mark on it.
Okay, we'll come back to that on another day after they have a chance to talk to the chief. Okay. Let's see, let me get my papers organized. I had a question on page 66. Just as an example, because like I said, I'm a visual person, on 4.11.2 fences, D, it says rear and side yard fences shall not exceed 8 feet in height, and I'm just wondering if the building by the bridge towards BB, if that has an 8-foot fence, or is that a taller fence? It's like a plumbing place. Yeah, do they have a 8-foot fence? Is that how tall that one is? Because I think it's a good height. If it's taller. Okay, all right, great.
Yeah, I think it's at least 8 foot. It's pretty high.
All right. Anybody else have a question about page 66? Okay. Open spaces on page 67. Anyone have a question about that? Okay, on page 68, does anyone have a question about the alternative development options for planned unit developments? Okay, page 69. All right. Page 70. I didn't have a question really, but I did have a comment about the top of the page where letter I is. It says existing trees shall be considered when planning the common open areas, playgrounds, parking areas, and finished grade levels. Just a note for us on site plans, I think it would be great for all construction to consider that and not just raise an entire area and build houses. Like if there were trees, it would be nice if they could incorporate those. I don't know how that would work as far as regulations, but it'd be nice if we kept that in mind when we were looking at future neighborhoods and maybe asking the builder about it. And then the residential cluster development, I honestly wonder why Ward needs that in our code. It's a confusing.
Just to show my ignorance, somebody explain to me what that would look like. What is that?
So it's kind of like townhomes, but more densely put together for like multiple buildings put together to create more open space and save the trees in the area more and kind of build around the natural aspects of the site rather than making the site fit what they want to build. You know what I mean? That's what I think of it as. Gary, Bruce, Michael, y'all have any comments on that?
I think that was kind of the design that Legacy Farms started out with.
Okay.
And it's been modified some, but the very first meeting we had with them, they brought virtual reality goggles, and we sat there and looked around this neighborhood, and the planning commission did, and they had a lot of short fences in the backyard and walk space, and green space, and the zero lot lines like y'all looked at tonight. That's all 4 of those are individually owned. They're not rental units. They could do that, I guess. If you bought it, you could do what you wanted to with it, but they're not designed to be quadplexes or duplexes. They're zero lot lines. And I think that's kind of what, yeah, I think that's kind of what that is kind of referencing, although we didn't do that, but that's, I think something like that's kind of, but it started out a little slower. It's been a little slower than what he anticipated it being. He started that, and then COVID hit, and then money got tight, and I don't know. A lot more green space, houses right up on the road. All their driveways are in the back. Their garages and their driveways are in the back, and the houses are up closer to the road, and it's just a little more green space. So I don't know what y'all want to do with that, but that's kind of that's kind of how I think that was designed to be. I'm impressed you had that with you, Bruce.
More green space.
So, yeah, and the green space in the back, we're fine with, because the city wouldn't have to maintain that, so. The trees and the green space in the backyards wouldn't affect traffic, sidewalks, utilities. That's the problem you have with trees that line the streets. But I don't know if
Yeah.
that's what they're referencing, but that's what I think of when I hear residential cluster development.
Well, I think too, and, maybe not necessarily here, but that's for like the younger generation, don't really care if they have a yard. So they're, smaller footprint.
And to go along with that, on the next page, 71, well, before, does anyone have any questions or comments about 70? Okay. On 71, under 4.14.2.2B, it says maximum lot coverage, building height, parking requirements for underlining zones shall apply to the cluster development. These requirements, however, shall be applied to the entire site rather than to any individual lot. And I was wondering if this means that only setbacks are for the edge of the development and not, like, side setbacks would only be for the edge of the development, or how would that? Because I guess since they're put together like those four we saw tonight, then there's no setbacks for side setbacks because they're right up against each other.
I think they have setbacks, but we did that design more like a PUD because we didn't have a cluster development part of in our ordinance, so we addressed
Right.
it as a PUD housing. The setbacks are just smaller, but I think there's still setbacks where they can put their fence and where their sidewalks is going to be and how close they can get to their house. They're just closer to the street, and all the garages are in the back. They have alleys in the back for ingress, egress. And the streets are just there as the thoroughfares to get to the subdivision.
Okay.
So there's, like I said, there's the 4-unit structure that's there now. There's 4 houses, I believe, are completed. You can drive by there and kind of see what it looks like now, and you can kind of see the driveways in the back of the houses as opposed to the front of the house. It's just something that's new to this area, but.
Okay.
Gary, how many units gonna be built in that subdivision?
I don't think he's modified it yet, have you? Do you ever have any?
Which one?
He's the Legacy Farms. That subdivision, he started it on the Balding Street end, and it's gonna go all the way to 367. It's gonna come out in front of A-State Plumbing, and then slope off into that real low area where it's not buildable. It'd be the natural drain back there, but I don't remember a number. We've been dealing with that for probably 4 years, at least. So I don't remember. We looked at the preliminary plat. I was chairman of the planning commission when we addressed that. But it's been at least 4 years, maybe well beyond that. I don't know, but I don't remember how many, Mayor. I don't.
And the main entrance to that subdivision is gonna be down off of 367?
There's going to be a main entrance off of 367, as well as the one that they've built now off of Balding. Right now, the only way to access it is off of Balding.
You have any complaints from anybody on Balding about that?
I've not heard any, Bruce. You built it any?
I've driven down there, it's nice.
They are nice. They are nice
They
homes.
fixed it up real good.
They're going for $400,000 and $500,000. They're $500 million homes on the end that he's built, that he's already built. So. Bruce is looking at a plat, said 160, so.
And even on the site plan, like, they still have building lines on there, and so they still got the setbacks on those building lines.
Yeah, if you drive down, past the post office, you can't miss it. It's the last place you can turn off to the right, before you get to the old stage stop for some of y'all, but it's all those houses. You'll see them from Balding.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. It was just something that I was a little confused about. Further down, well, actually the last one on the page, H, under the design regulations, it's G.H. It says where the site contains floodplains or wetlands, at least 50% of such floodplains or wetlands shall be included in calculating the common open space. But I saw further up here on D, it says 15 feet in depth. So the common yard could have it be 7.5 in depth. I mean, that seems like, because 7.5 would be unusable due to wetlands, because 50% of 15. I was just wondering if we could up that to like maybe 70%.
That one's pretty much ready for you.
Well, your wetlands, you can't build on, you can't do anything,
Right.
you can't even mow it.
Right, but I'm saying, they're saying that the part that abuts it, that is usable, they only have to have 50% of a 15-foot depth for open space for the neighborhood. So that's 7.5 feet along the line of the wetlands.
Yeah, that's regulated, they have to have it.
So, but I'm saying, can we not make it a bigger chunk than 7.5 feet? Could we make it 10 feet abutting the wetlands? Could we do something like that?
We're gonna increase what their minimum is.
Correct.
Well, that's good. They're not gonna like you with that.
Because I just worry about kids, you know, or people or dogs or anything, you know, because we are pretty low here in a lot of areas.
Just say 10 foot.
Yeah, where the site contains floodplains or wetlands, at least 10 foot of such floodplains or no.
It's a percentage, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a percentage.
Just increase the percentage.
Yes, to 70. Would y'all be okay with that?
Yeah, I don't see an issue with it.
Reducing the usable open space when you do that. You're reducing the usable open space when you do that, if you're increasing the wetlands. You can't use the wetlands
Right.
for
So
nothing.
how do we put it where it increases the usable space and not the wetland space?
You would decrease it, would that be correct?
So have it be 25% instead of 50?
No, but that's what Art was talking about. I think that's regulated.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can trade off the wetlands.
We may
Okay,
need to
and I would
research what
trade it off
federal
in
says.
Iran.
I can,
I tried that one
I can check with the FEMA regs and see exactly what that is, because I'm not sure, but I can look into that and see if there's any literature on that with FEMA.
I've lived in base housing before where we butted up to wetlands and having a little fenced area like right behind your house that covers your patio, and then having this much of a yard behind that was miserable for the kids. And the kids ended up playing in the street, which isn't safe. So I just would hope that we could make it where the whole building has to be moved forward so that the kids would have more playing space. That's my thought. I don't,
Maybe these people don't want that space. You know? Maybe they're the young ones that this,
Don't want a yard.
yeah.
We could adjust the distance between buildings too. Like it's only 10 foot on here. That's pretty close.
Well, it's like the replay with the Deerfield, you know, use that as a reference. I mean, that butts up to floodplain, and all they had them do was just move it 2 feet so it wasn't in the floodplain. So I think you can, based off of that, and that was FEMA's recommendation, I think you can go all the way up to the floodplain. You can't get into you got to be so far from the floodway, but I think you can butt up to the floodplain.
Okay. It was just more of a quality of life, kind of, for the residents than, but FEMA is a whole other thing that I have no,
Yeah, but I can still look into that and just
Okay.
get you the literature on that, just to confirm
okay,
if
thank
they have
you.
anything. Yep.
Okay, I think, was that it? I think that was it for, yep, that was it for tonight. I have options for y'all for next work session. We could either do 4.15 through 4.17, which is pages 72 through 84, which is about the same as what we did tonight. Or we can do 4.15 through the tables on page 101. So that would be 72 through 101, which would include landscape and sign regulations. So it would kind of block it off and easier. We wouldn't stop in the middle of a section. But also, 417, page 84 is stopping at a section 2. It's just, let's see, when I went through this earlier, let me look at this. Yeah, it stops with, what is, driveways for, so access, parking, and loading is what it stops with. So do y'all want to do the long one, or do you want to do another one that's like this, where it's less to look at? It's up to y'all. Let me know.
I vote the long one.
Well, I know the mayor wants to get through this faster, so that's why I was thinking that would be, and there's only 166 pages total before we get to definitions, so we could be really close to getting it done if we do it that way.
And so we go through 419.7 sign standards, that table. Okay.
Okay. Who's going to bring the pizza then?
I'll bring the pizza.
Okay. So we're going to do through the table on 101 and stop at Article 5 subdivision standards is the next, because 102 has nothing on it, so it's a good place to stop. All right. You have to bring your own drink? Oh, I do, okay.
I think that assignment is going to be a pretty good assignment. If you'll talk fast, I'll listen.
I'll try to talk faster next time.
Art, your assignment is to bring a large meat lovers pizza.
All right, we're going to close the work session.